Hello again, and welcome back to our last lecture for a long time about the different categories of roots that make different looking verb forms. The roots we're going to be looking at this time may be the strangest of all, but they're also incredibly common. These are roots that have only 2 consonants, not 3. There are a number of reasons to think that the system of 3-letter roots does not go all the way back to the beginning of the language. For example, there are a number of roots that share the same 2 radicals with a different first or third radical, and the verbs all have similar meanings or fall into the same semantic category. However it happened, there are a number of verbs in Biblical Hebrew, and for that matter, they still exist in modern Hebrew, that only have 2 consonants. From the way they work, it's clear that the hole in the pattern is in the middle of the root. They have radical 1 and radical 3, but not radical 2. So it's common to call this category hollow verbs. What fills the space in the middle is a vav or a yud, but not a vav or yud that's a consonant. What's in there instead is an u, o, or e vowel spelled in the dictionary with a vav or a yud. Some textbooks call these verbs ayin vav and ayin yud verbs, or tu vav and tu yud verbs, but that's very misleading. There are roots that have a yud or a vav as their middle consonant, like haya, to be, but that's not what we're talking about here. If the vav or the yud is a consonant, that's not a category. It acts like a consonant, then fine, there's nothing to talk about. In Genesis 35:29, vayigva Yitzchak vayamot. Isaac breathed his last and died. The roots of both verbs have a vav in the middle. But in gimel vav ayin, the vav is a consonant. And as you can see, vayigva is a perfectly normal verb. Contrast mem vav tav, where the vav is not a consonant but a vowel. In a dictionary, vav is the middle root letter, but in this word we're looking at, it doesn't even appear as a consonant. It's the O sound of vayamot, that kamatz katan. That kind of vav, and yud as well, that's the category of verbs that we're going to focus on today. At the end of the lesson, we'll have a list of commonly used hollow verbs, and some of them are very common, occurring hundreds or even thousands of times. Before we start, here are some general rules about hollow verbs. In the perfect, the middle vowel of a hollow root does not appear. They all have the a vowel of a perfect verb, amarti, katavnu, shimartem, so they all look the same, no matter what their real middle vowel is. You see the first and third radicals, but you don't see an u, o, or e vowel in between them. That means that the standard dictionary form for Hebrew verbs, the kal, third masculine singular perfect, wouldn't work for hollow verbs. For those verbs, we use the infinitive form. We're going to look at the whole paradigm, but first, just these. Me doing it, first common singular, in the perfect and the imperfect. Kamti, I rose. Bati, I came. Samti, I placed. You have no idea what the middle vowel of these hollow roots are. But the imperfect forms give it away. I will rise, akum. I will come, avo. I will place, asim. So there are actually 3 kinds of hollow roots with u, o, and e, and the u ones are way more common than the others. If you see a hollow verb in the perfect that you need to look up, always look it up with a vav in the middle first. Only if you don't find it, then you look it up with a yud. And here are a dozen or so of the most common hollow verbs in the Bible. Bo, to come. Bosh, be ashamed. Gur, reside. Kaf vav nun, to be firm, only appears outside the kal, never appears in the kal binyan, but it's a very important root in other binyanim. Lin, to spend the night. Mut, to die. Nun vav chet, to rest. Nus, to flee. Sur, turn aside. Kum, rise. Rum, to be high. Roots, to run. Riv, to quarrel. Shuv, to return. And sim, with a sin, to put, place, or grant. Now let's fill in a complete verb chart for hollow verbs. First, the perfect. Kamti, kamta, no second feminine singular form for kum, and in fact there's only 10 such forms for kal hollow verbs in the entire Bible. 7 of them are from bo, so I'm putting bat in that place in the chart. Bat, you, feminine singular, have come. In the third person, kam and kama. Note where that accent is. Kamti, kamta, kama. And in the plural, kamnu, kamtem, those second plural suffixes are always heavy. They always pull the accent over. And it would be kamten, but there are no kal second feminine plural perfect hollow verbs anywhere in the Bible. And kamu. Again, notice where the accent is. And this is a little bit tricky. Shavu, from shuv, they returned, but shavu, like hayu or ra'u or asu, is from shin bet hey, which means to take captive. Kamu, from kum, they got up. Shavu, from shuv, they returned, versus ra'u, from ra'ah, they saw. Shavu, from shava, they took captive. When shin and bet are in this form, the accent tells the whole story. Shuv is much more common than shava, but it's almost exactly as common as yashav. Those are the 2 verbs that give people trouble. They shouldn't. If you know them, there's no confusion whatsoever, but it takes a while to get to that level of confidence. Now the participles. Again, the standard kal form that we recognize has 3 holes for consonants, holech, kotev, shofet, but these hollow roots have only 2 consonants to put in them. So the shape is completely different. Only the endings remain the same. This is the shape of the kal participle for hollow verbs. And like the perfect, it's the same for all of them, no matter whether there's a vav or a yud in the middle of the root. Ba, ba'a, ba'im, ba'ot. Just like tov, tova, tovim, tovot. The participle's a verbal adjective, but with no middle consonant to give us that omer shape. And definitely not omeret, because there's no middle consonant. So it will always be ba, ba'a. That also means that the masculine singular participle is ba, same as the third masculine singular perfect. And the feminine singular participle is ba'a, same sounds as the third feminine singular perfect, but with a different accent. The perfect, she came, bati, bata, ba'a. The participle, ba'a, ba'im, ba'ot. And the difference in meaning between the 2 forms, she did it or she was doing it, is so slight that it's not worth worrying about mistaking them for each other. Just come back here if you need to and remind yourself of where the accent falls. Is it a bati, ba'a, perfect accent, or a ba'a, ba'ot, participle accent? There are a very, very few kal passive participles of hollow roots, just a dozen in the entire Bible. They use u in between the consonants. We're not going to learn them, but you can find them in dictionaries. What we are going to learn now is the imperfect of hollow verbs. Totally simple, same endings and prefixes that you already know. It's what you attach the prefixes and the endings to that's different. And here they are. Again, a mix of roots in the chart. You need to be able to recognize the shape of these forms. And this time, the giveaway is kamatz under the prefix letter. All the way through, except in the quite rare feminine plurals where the accent is pulled away from that syllable and you have a shva, everywhere else, kamatz under the etan letter tells you that you are looking at a hollow verb. Let's go through them. First person singular, ashit, shin yud taf, I will place or put. Second masculine singular, tamut, mem vav taf, you will die. Second feminine singular, taguri, gimel vav resh, you will reside. Third masculine singular, yavo, bet vav aleph, he will come. And third feminine singular, tashuv, shin vav bet, she will come back. Kamatz under the prefix tells you that they are hollow. And in the plural, nalin, lamed yod nun, we will spend the night. Tamutu, mem vav taf again, you all will die. Teshuvena, it's from shuv again. You have the syllable right there in the middle. It's got that na ending and a taf prefix. Has to be second or third feminine plural. And timutena, from mut, same thing. All of you females, or those third person females, will come back or will die. And yavo'u, from bet vav aleph, they will come. Third masculine or mixed plural. Again, your tip-off for the kal imperfect of hollow verbs is that kamatz under the etan letter, the prefix letter. The few that don't have it are second or third feminine plurals with ena, and there will still be that shuv or mut or bo building block in the middle of the verb for you to recognize. Let's look at a couple of these in biblical verses. In Genesis 15, the Lord promises Abram that he will have as many descendants as stars in the sky, and that the land of Canaan will be given to them as a possession. First, though, they will have to leave the land and spend 400 years in slavery. Then he tells Abram, verse 15, Ve'ata tavo el beitecha beshalom. Ve'ata, but you, remember that v doesn't only mean and. It can mean but or, depending on the context. But you, tavo, taf prefix, second masculine singular, kamatz under the prefix, that's the sign of a hollow verb, and the root is bet vav aleph. But you shall come, el avotecha, to your fathers, that is your ancestors, beshalom, in peace, before the exile and the slavery starts. And eventually, verse 16, dor revi'i yashuvu hena. Dor means a generation, so dor revi'i, a fourth generation. You remember Yom Revi'i, when the sun, moon, and stars are made? Yashuvu, ya prefix and u on the end, has got to be third masculine plural imperfect The kamatz under the prefix is telling me the verb is hollow, and anyway, there it is right in front of me, shuv, they will return. Dor is singular, but it's a collective noun for a group of people. And you can use a singular or plural verb with collective nouns. A fourth generation will return hena. Believe it or not, that's the a meaning to. They will return hain, to here. They shall return hither. Ve'ata tavo el avotecha beshalom, ve'dor revi'i yashuvu hena. Here's another one from Genesis 3:3 in the Garden of Eden story. Eve is explaining the rules to the snake. Umi pri ha'etz asher betoch hagan, amar Elohim, lo tochlu mimenu, velo tig'u bo pen timutun. Mi dagesh, and from, pri ha'etz, the fruit of the tree, asher betoch hagan, which is in the middle of the garden, amar Elohim, God said, lo tochlu mimenu, you, plural tochlu, shall not eat from it, mimenu. Tochlu, from Aleph Kaf Lamed, you shall eat. Lo tochlu, the command, you shall not eat. And here's where Eve is adding something we haven't heard before, lo tig'u bo. What's the root of tig'u? Tishmeru, tichtavu, tig'u. See the dagesh? Not gimel, gimel, ayin, of course, but nun, gimel, ayin, to touch. And in Hebrew, you touch be something. So, lo tig'u bo, you shall not touch it. Pen, lest, temutun. Imperfect verbs that end in u sometimes add a nun to the end for no apparent reason. And it happens with verbs that end in e 4 times in Ruth and once in Isaiah. This one's a pausal form, it's the end of the verse, so the accent lands at the end of the verb, and that means our kamatz under the prefix got shortened. Instead of tamutu, timutun. If you're looking for a kamatz under the prefix letter, what do you do when you find a shva instead? Here's my suggestion. Focus on the payoff syllable, mut. Almost always, it's obvious who's doing the verb anyway. Lo tochlu mimenu velo tig'u bo pen timutun, mut. You must not eat of it or touch it, lest you die. Now, one more form of hollow roots that we need to look at, the converted imperfect. We saw a couple of examples of it at the end of the last lecture in Numbers 24-25 about Balaam and Balak. Here it is. Vayakom Bilam, vayelech, vayashov limkomo. Balaam did something, vayakom, and he went, vayelech, and he did something, vayashov, to his place, limkomo. What did he do? The same way that yomar, he will say, shifts its accent backwards in the converted imperfect and becomes vayomer, the same thing happens with hollow verbs. Yakum, he will arise, vayakom, and he arose. The long u changes to a short o spelled with a kamatz katan. And now you also recognize vayashov, the converted imperfect form from shuv, and he returned. Yakum, vayakom. Yashuv, vayashov. Kum and shuv are actually very important as helping verbs in biblical Hebrew. When you shuv and do another verb, it means to do that verb again or to do it in the opposite direction. And when you kum and do another verb. It doesn't necessarily mean that you literally stood up and then did the other verb. It often means that you started. So you could translate Numbers 24:25, Vayakom Bil'am Vayelech Vayashov Limkomo, quite literally as Balaam arose and he went and he returned to his place. But it really means something more like, and Balaam started back to his place. Vayelech from halach, that's what he did, he went, but Vayakom and Vayashov are telling about that verb. They're telling you how he went. He started going, and where was he going? He was going back to his hometown. Vayakom Bil'am, Vayelech, Vayashov Limkomo. Let's look at one more perfect verb from a hollow root as a reminder. How about this one from Genesis 7:9 in the flood story? Shnaim Shnaim Ba'u El Noach El HaTeva, Zachar Unekeva. Shnaim means two. Shnaim Shnaim, 2 by 2. Ba'u, recognize it? They came. Bati, I came. Bata, you came. Ba'u, they, the animals, came. El Noach, to Noah. El HaTeva, to the ark. Zachar Unekeva, male and female. Amazingly enough, Noah is not told to build a ship, but a teva. An ark is really a box, even if it's a box you can float in. Because that word, which is all over the flood story, also occurs just one other place in the Bible. A teva is what Moses' mother put him in. In Exodus 2:3, when Moses' mother couldn't hide him from the Egyptians anymore, and she knew the Egyptians were killing all the Jewish boy babies, Vatikach lo tevat gomeh. Vatikach, remember it? Looks like a first nun verb, but it isn't. It's from lakach, to take. Vatikach lo, and she got for him tevat, construct form of teva, a box made out of gomeh, papyrus reeds. The NRSV calls it a papyrus basket, but the King James says an ark of bulrushes. And an ark is a box. That's what the English word means. And in the Bible, it's used only in these two places, throughout the story of the flood, and twice in the story of Moses. In both stories, it's a box that you put in the water to save life. So Moses' mother took a papyrus box, Vatikach lo tevat gomeh, Vatasem ba et hayeled. Vatasem, the converted imperfect form of tasim, hollow verb, and she put ba in it. See that mapik in the hay? Teva is a feminine noun, so ba in it, et hayeled, the boy. She put the boy in it. Just like with Vayakom, the accent on the imperfect tasim moves backward when you make it a converted imperfect, and the long e vowel becomes a short e. Takum vatakom. Tasim vatasem. And here it is again. Vatasem basuf al sfat hayeor. And she put in the suf, in the rushes, al sifat. Safa means lip. Your lips are sfatayim because you have a pair of them. But safa can also mean the edge of a body of water. And yeor means the Nile. Vatasem basuf al sifat hayeor. And she put in the rushes at the edge of the Nile. Notice that vatasem doesn't have an object in Hebrew. In English, you can't just put without putting something, but in Hebrew, they'll often say a verb without bothering to use the pronoun that we have to use in English. In this case, the beauty is that, is she putting him, masculine, or it, the ark, the teva, feminine? Well, she's putting them both. In English, you have to say either him or it, but Hebrew is not forced to make that choice. And now we're going to find out what happened. We're going to read Exodus 2:5, and we'll spend some time with it. As you know, I think it's very important to throw you into the pool and get you to work out as much as you can of what's going on by yourselves. So to start, I'm just going to read this to you. See what you can get out of it. Don't hesitate to pause me and see what you can figure out on your own before we continue. Here we go. Vatered bat paro lirchotz al hayeor, lirchotz, to wash. V'na'aroteha holchot al yad hayeor. Vatere et hateva betoch hasuf, hasuf means the bulrushes. Vatishlach et amata, and ama is a female eved. Vatishlach et amata vatikacheha. There's a lot that you've learned in here, and there are some things that you haven't learned yet. Vatered, the Tzere tells you it's a first yud verb, and she went down. Here comes the subject of the verb, who went down, bat paro, Pharaoh's daughter. Lirchotz, to wash. You recognize the l, that's our preposition to, and rachatz means wash. We'll learn this infinitive form in the next lesson. Lirchotz, to wash, al hayeor, at the Nile. You can't be washing on top of the Nile or above the Nile. Al can also mean right next to. V'na'aroteha, a na'ar is a boy, and often a servant boy. A na'ara, I think you get it. Na'arot, plural. V'na'aroteha, and her servant girls. Holchot, what's the form? Feminine plural participle. Her servant girls were walking al yad hayeor, next to the Nile. Al yad, literally at hand. Something that's at hand is nearby. So in Hebrew, when you are at the hand of something, al yad it, you are next to it. Her servant girls were walking along by the Nile. Vatere, you remember Vayar Elohim Kitov, and God saw that it was good. But the feminine form we saw in our lesson on third hay verbs, it's not vatar, it's vatere et hateva. So who saw the ark? Pharaoh's daughter or her servant girls? Vatere is singular, isn't it? Pharaoh's daughter saw the ark, betoch hasuf, in the midst of the rushes. Vatishlach et amata, she sent her slave girl, one of the na'arot, I guess, vatikacheha. Vatikach, you know, it's the same thing Moses' mom did, and she took. Looks like a first nun verb, but it's from lakach, to take or to get. And what is this suffix on the verb, eha? If I asked you to tell me the person, gender, and number of that suffix, you would have to say, ha has to be third feminine singular. In this case, referring to the feminine noun, teva. She, the ama, took it, the teva, vatishlach et amata vatikacheha. And Pharaoh's daughter sent her slave girl, and she, the slave girl, got the box, the teva. We're on a roll. And I, for one, want to find out what happened next. So let's keep reading. Vatiftach, what's the root? Pei tafchet. And she opened. All these verbs could be you, masculine singular, opened, and so forth. But we're talking about Pharaoh's daughter, so obviously they're all third feminine singular, and she opened. As I said, context almost always makes this kind of thing obvious. Vatir'ehu, and she saw Ehu. What happened a minute ago? Vatikaheha, and she took it, feminine suffix. Now, vatar'ehu, and she saw him, masculine suffix. Hebrew verbs love to have object suffixes built into them. And we are going to take a careful look at that later in the course. For now, start getting comfortable with it. And she saw him, et hayeled, the boy. V'hinei na'ar bocheh. And wow! Remember that hine, behold, in old-fashioned Bible translations, hine is a word that shows you a particular person's point of view. In a case like this, it's all about the surprise she felt when she saw a baby in the box. And bocheh, kal, masculine singular participle, from bacha, to weep. Ending because it's a lamed hey verb. And there was a crying child. A na'ar this time, not a na'ara, a boy, not a girl. V'hinei na'ar bocheh. Vatachmol alav, and she felt sorry for him. Vatomer, and she said, Mi yaldei ha'ivrim ze. Ze, this, is mi yaldei ha'ivrim, from the boys of Yeled, Yeladim, Yaldei, the boys of. And min, see the dagesh in the yud, from, in biblical Hebrew, often means some of, or in this case, one of. Yaldei ha'ivrim, the boys of the Hebrews, the ones my dad said were supposed to be thrown into the river and drowned. But Miriam had been watching to see what would happen to her brother. Now, in verse 7, she steps up to the plate. Vatomer achoto el bat paro, and his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, ha'elech, tsere under the prefix letter, I will go, because halach likes to pretend that it's a first yud verb. So elech, I will go. But what is ha'elech? Can't be the, you can't have the I will go. It's a question mark. Shall I go? Vekarati lach. Kara, he called. We learned way back on day 1 of creation. Karati, I called. But vekarati, converted perfect, making the perfect verb do the job of an imperfect, I will call. All part of the question, of course, ha'elech vekarati lach, shall I go and call for you, isha meineket, a nursing woman, min ha'ivriot, from the Hebrews, the ot, the female Hebrews. Extra credit if you can figure out the root and the form of meineket, which is not kal. Vetenik lach et hayaled, so she can nurse the boy for you. And once more from the top. Vatered bat paro lirchotz al hayeor, v'na'aroteha holchot al yad hayeor. Vatere et hateva betoch hasuf. Hasuf means the bulrushes. Vatishlach et amata vatikacheha. Vatiftach vatar'ehu et hayeled. V'hinei na'ar bocheh. Vatachmol alav. Vatomer mi yaldei ha'ivrim zeh. Vatomer achoto el bat paro. Ha'elech ve'karati lach isha meneket min ha'ivriot ve'tenik lach et hayaled? Go back and listen and read it some more, 5 times or even 10. So that's our lesson on hollow verbs. Please go to Numbers 22 and find 5 examples of hollow verbs that have vav in the middle of the root. And there are 2 examples that have yud in the middle. Can you find them? When we return, we'll learn the infinitive. See you then.